Next topic, that is expanding beyond DE&I, the role of language and business communication in fostering inclusion and belonging in global organization, by Ms. Vineeta Mittal, Associate Director, People and Culture at Thornton Bharat. Ms. Vineeta Mittal is a seasoned HR professional with over 15 years of experience in spearheading business and organization, while talent interventions across financial services, media, and professional services industries. She is currently driving strategic talent initiative including the diversity, equity, and inclusion at GrantThornton Bharat. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a big round of applause for Miss Vineeta Mittal.
Yeah, so I have to use this? Okay, sure, thank you. Am I audible? Okay, great. So it's my pleasure to be here, to be a part of this gathering of eminent HR and L&D leaders here. I've always believed L&D is a vital function in any organization. And with this rapidly changing ecosystem, this role becomes all the more significant in preparing the workforce of the future. In fact, I say it's a workforce in the present because in today's agile world, even future sounds too far-fetched. So my compliments to all the L&D leaders here. The topic that I'm going to cover today is interesting and very relevant to the evolving workspace. There is a growing focus on building diversity at workplace today, diversity that reflects various dimensions and demographics that we see around us. And with this increasing push and focus on diversity, the role of inclusion becomes critical. How do we keep diverse workforce, in fact, distributed workforce, if we talk about today, engaged and feel belonged in the workplace? So I'm going to deep dive into one of the key enablers, which is language. It sounds simple, isn't it? Yes, it does, but this simple element has the power to transform workplaces and build a culture of inclusion. Language, I'll just cover a bit on what is the significance of language. Language is like an oxygen. It is essential to the existence of all of us, the human beings. We being social animals, we want to communicate, and language drives those communications. It is the foundation of the social experience. Today, the language is what brings us together. It sets us apart as a human being essential to our existence. And that's where its power lies. It's a powerful tool to demonstrate inclusive behavior. Today, language has the power to build relationships and forge connections. But at the same time, it is equally liable to creating barriers and impacting inclusion. And that's where the role of inclusion at the workplace becomes important, because that's where it is seeded. Coming to inclusive language, so as I said, inclusion and diversity go hand in hand. You cannot have a diverse workforce not feeling included. And similarly, inclusion in a homogeneous group doesn't give you any benefits. You really want to leverage diversity of the group, and for that, the inclusion becomes a key ingredient. So inclusion is about language. And while it is not just the one element, it is a key element. What do we mean by inclusive language? In simple terms, it is a form of communication that is free from any biases, expressions, or tones that may segregate or exclude people based on their demographics or their attributes. So some core tenets of inclusive language: it acknowledges diversity. Like I was sharing, today around us, we see a myriad of dimensions of diversity: gender, geography, generation, sexual orientation, identities. There's so much of awareness on these dimensions. It's important that our language conveys that acknowledgement. It conveys respect, self-determination. Today, as an individual, I see myself identifying with a particular gender, with a particular orientation. Language should be able to use those words that affirms that identity, that gives respect to individuals, what they themselves want to align with. Language is sensitive to differences. As I said, each one of us are different and unique in our own way, and language should acknowledge that. Instead of homogenizing these experiences or minimizing the differences, language should have the power to bring a diverse workforce together with the use of that inclusive words and phrases. I'll come to that part. What are those words, examples that we can use? It promotes equal opportunities, avoiding stereotypes. I'll again come to this part in a bit. We all have seen various stereotypes around us. How language should not limit somebody's perception of somebody's potential, for example. So today, we use language which may be gender exclusive, or there could be indirect use of metaphors which we have got used to over a period of time, but we do not realize the negative impact it can have when we are talking to somebody. I'm now going to show you two workplace scenarios. I'm sure all of you will be able to relate to it. It shows how use of inclusive language can make a change. This example is of a team meeting. The super coach or a people manager is talking to the team and saying, look, I have heard many differing views in this team meeting. We really need to agree to a project approach. Is there a better way to say that? I appreciate the diverse perspectives that the team brings to the table. Why don't we discuss these further to decide the best project approach? Simple use of words. When there are various views coming in, do you call them differing views, or you give them, or you give that the appreciation by saying these are diverse views, and this is adding value to our meeting, adding value to our discussion. One more example. This is, I think it's a classic case of performance management. How do you give constructive feedback? The project report has several errors. You do not seem to be focused at work. Versus, I have noticed you have not been at your best at work lately. Why don't we discuss how those errors happened so that we can mitigate these next time? The change of words can make the person feel included. So how can we imbibe inclusive language? It's not rocket science. It's about being conscious, being mindful of using it. So the first way how we can avoid, how we can imbibe inclusive language is by avoiding unconscious bias. I know all of us have heard of it. There is so much of awareness on this. There are conscious biases, there are unconscious biases. In fact, there are over 150 unconscious biases. So being mindful of this. I was sharing about stereotypes a little back. So what's a stereotype? It's a widely held belief that you have about a certain group of people or individuals based on your prior assumptions. And these stereotypes could be religious, gender, social, cultural, which have been passed down through generations to us. For instance, there are certain jobs which are deemed fit for men and not women. We associate some traits or characteristics to people who come from a particular geography. I won't talk about that geography, but we know how regions within our country are excluded and how we typecast, stereotype people based on that. Stereotypes are all about overgeneralizations, which is not correct. You're segregating people based on certain stereotypical traits, and that creates a barrier to building an inclusive environment. Practice gender inclusive language. Again, there is an increasing focus on this. We all would have known about usage of pronouns, our preferred pronouns, our preferred terminologies. Why it becomes important? Because today, within gender as a dimension, there are various subdimensions that we've come to know exist. It's no longer about a binary gender, right? Somebody who identifies themselves as a binary would use a pronoun of either she, her, or he, him. But there are people who identify themselves as non-binary too. They would use they, them. So awareness of these pronouns, in fact, they, them is no longer used as a plural pronoun. It's used as a singular pronoun. When you are not sure of somebody's identity, you use gender neutral language, and that's where it comes in. In fact, I think when you were addressing everybody, you said ladies and gentlemen, and I was telling my colleague who was sitting next to me, that's not inclusive. Because ladies and gentlemen means that you are only identifying two sets of people, which is like binary, men and women. There may be people in the group who may identify themselves as something which is in between, like non-binary. So how do you make them feel included? So we could just say, good day everyone, or to all the leaders and professionals sitting here. So there are different ways, and I know it's very difficult because we all are so used to saying it, we all are so used to hearing it, it becomes so common. So for example, when a team meeting starts, hey guys, it's been a great meeting. And in fact, I have often said this, no longer now, but in the past, but I tell myself, no, it's a masculine word. Why am I giving focus to that when my team comprises different genders? So instead of saying, hey guys, we say, hey people, hey folks, hi team. So that's a conscious attempt that you really want to bring that inclusive language, and it really makes an impact. People who are part of the team, people who are the recipients of that language can tell you what is the difference it is making to them. Share your experiences. I think there is nothing better than sharing your own experiences, being open to people about what you have learned, about the biased impact that you have seen, because it's all about sharing and learning. And I think that's what I would encourage each one of you, that in your meetings, in your interactions, discussions with your peer set, colleagues, talk about these examples. Because when you talk about it more, it will stay with you more, and next time when you will talk about it, you will make a conscious attempt to use those inclusive words. So lastly, I have just put out some of these terminologies which says what is inclusive, what is not inclusive. Idea is not to memorize these words which are good words or bad words, because it is impossible to have a fixed list of inclusive, non-inclusive terms, because language is evolving. It is changing, and you cannot really keep pace with it. Rather, the language should be centered around compassion in a way that the language communicates and recognizes the differences, the various diversity that exists around us. I would conclude by saying that using inclusive language today is no longer a choice. It is a need for us to communicate in a compassionate and thoughtful way. Thank you. Yeah, any questions I would be happy to. Yeah, please.
Do we have any questions? Can we have a mic, please?
Sorry, I'll just keep this. Yeah, that's okay.
First of all, I'd like to thank you for bringing a very simple yet difficult point across, because language is something that exists all around us, but we are just not aware of how we use it when we have conversations. I have seen at leadership levels as well, a lot of times in discussions, people forget the kind of words that they use. You're aware, and it kind of offends you also in a certain way, because you know that there might be people in the group who might not really find it very sensitive, the usage of these specific words. So what are some of the best practices that you have in your organization to create that awareness on the language piece that, going forward, why don't you use this instead of this, right? Because every organization functions differently. So could you share some best practices where we can imbibe these in the regular language?
Sure. Thank you. I know it's a very valid question. Uh, See, there is no one-stop solution that can work. It's about, as I said, it's about creating awareness. How do you create that awareness? Various platforms. So like in GrantThornton, we use various platforms or forums, like Pride Month. We are celebrating Pride Month. We are giving out a glossary of what LGBTQIA stands for, what gender identity means, what gender expression means, what orientation means, and how interplay of this identity, expression, and orientation gives out various subdimensions that we should be aware of. We are curating e-learning modules, in-house e-learning modules, which are more engaging, giving out workplace scenarios, like the two workplace scenarios you saw. I just picked from one of our communications, because today you go out or on the net, you see a lot of information out available there, but how do you customize it and make it available to your people in such a way that they understand it and they know how to use it? I think that's where the key lies, and that's what we are doing, that making it easy and not overwhelming them with a lot of information, because certain topics are still a taboo in our country. Like LGBTQIA, we do not talk about it openly. And because we don't do it, people do not have idea about this. So it's about a continual process of creating awareness. But yes, I think leadership is talking about it a lot. I think that really makes an impact. Today we have widened our diversity dimension to include LGBTQ and IA plus people with disability. We are hiring them, and leadership talks about it. And that is something which sends a message that it's not that it's good to have, but we are really focused on having it, and that's being led from the top. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, my question was on the PWD aspect,
Okay.
right? Like, I thought that we should be saying visually impaired, but it's okay to say people who are not blind, right? For me, that word blind is something that kind of, okay, I don't want to use that word, right? So I say visually impaired. So how do you update yourself with what's happening? And that's why, the question.
Yeah. In fact, so today, for example, you say, I have a blind candidate versus a candidate who is blind. It makes a difference. When you say a blind candidate, you are putting the disability in the beginning, right? You're giving that a priority, which is not the right way. But when you say a candidate who is blind, is fine, is a better way to say, because you are keeping candidate in the spotlight. That's okay. He may have a certain disability, which is fine. And I know there are ways to say disability. We do not say disability, we say special ability, for example, right?
Correct.
Similarly, people who come from underprivileged background, we say social mobility, how you are mobilizing people across various social strata. So yeah, there are different ways of, saying these, and as I said, you cannot get to know all of this in 1 hour, in 1 day. It's about talking, hearing, and using it. Because when you do this, when you follow this cycle, is when it stays with you. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Do we have any other questions?
Yeah, please.
Can we have a mic, please, over here?
This is what I am saying is not a question. This is more of observation or feeling. Many a time what happens is whosoever is receiver of the communication, actually his sensitivity decides what the language should be. and not per se something which can be prescribed, that one should say this or shouldn't be saying this, like that. So many times understanding these sensitivities require lot of familiarity with which we are dealing in terms of their authenticity or culture or geography or whatever, and being highly empathetic. I mean, this is what I would like to say.
No, no, absolutely. I totally agree. Celebrating those differences, right, rather than comparing and judging. And I think as a society, when we all follow, and there is no prescriptive way. Today, you cannot go and say, okay, please tell me how should I talk, how should I communicate? No, there cannot be a prescriptive way. You should be able to make that judgment, and that obviously comes with experience, with your own conscious attempt that no, this is the way I should convey my message in a way that the person feels included, the person doesn't feel offended or excluded. So yes, it needs experience, it needs practice, if I can say, it needs practice.
Thank you. Any another questions do we have today?
Well, just to add to that, I mean, the language also needs to be updated in accordance with that.
Sorry,
So for
I didn't, language also needs
so in
to
the sense that, for example, in Hindi, we only have binary genders, right? वो आया था, वो आई थी, correct? So let's say if I have to refer to someone in my local language, right, which we usually do in the offices, right? Then how do we go about that? So the language also needs to be updated in this particular scenario of how to refer to so-called non-binary gender people, right?
Yeah,
So what is your suggestion on that?
Okay, so if I got your question right, you're saying that for people who are non-binary, who identify themselves non-binary, you're right that you need that awareness, and today we know, like I was sharing, people who identify themselves as non-binary, they use the pronoun, their preferred pronoun is they, them. In fact, we have started using that. We no longer use masculine word because by default, everybody was, so for example, if there is somebody in the room, I think he would be like this. Why should I say that? There was a time when people started saying she. In fact, females wanted to put out that pronoun. If there was somebody in the room, she would be like this. No. Now they say, and I think that's a better way of saying, if there is somebody in the room, they would be doing this. So, you're making it neutral. And that goes for non-binary people also. In the local, okay, you're talking about the local language. Yeah, but English is still the most widely used. Yeah.
Can we have a mic over there, please?
We can just refer to, instead of them, we can say कि आपने जैसे एक example लिया कि वो आई थी, you can just say वो आए थे, which is them in Hindi. So it's about the mindset. I think the language intricacies can be worked out.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, I think some very interesting questions, and I know this topic it touches each one of us, and not just at workplace, every day, every minute, every hour. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. And thank you for bringing this topic and correcting me on this. And I will make sure to keep this in mind for my next conference. Keeping that topic in mind, everyone, please give a big round of applause. And I would like to request you to please be on the stage for felicitation. And I would like to call upon stage Mr. Sumesh Khatua to please come on the stage and felicitate.
Yeah, yeah, sure. ये निकल गया, okay, sorry. I give this.